live. All right, I hope you can all see that. Welcome to our fact session for this FDP meeting. Hopefully you know who we are. I will tell you a little bit about us here in a second. We have a pretty full agenda for this afternoon. We're going to start off with a very brief introduction about who we are and what we have done and what we're trying to do today. We have an exciting activity for you to participate in. We will have some breakout rooms where you will be presented with a scenario to discuss, a scenario of fictional or mostly fictional situations. And you will discuss those scenarios and potential ideas of what could have prevented those scenarios from happening. We'll come back from each of those breakout rooms. There's fact leaders that are members that are leading those sessions. They will report out on the discussion, and then we will open it up to everybody back here in the main room. So this describes who we are and what we seek to do. We are a group made up of research administrators and faculty from different institutions that have been attending the FDP for quite some time, noticing that it's a great opportunity for research administrators and faculty to really learn about what each other do and to figure out what we might do collaboratively to reduce burden, particularly that type of burden that might be brought up at or faced by different types of institutions. So we've been meeting for quite some time. This is our committee. Suzanne and I are the current co-chairs. I think one thing to point out is that we have equal participation by admin reps and faculty reps. So that is one of the things that we want to make sure happens, is that we bring both sides to the table and see if we can actually communicate, which I think you'll see today is something we've been doing pretty well. And I think it's led to some interesting discussions. Some of those discussions, many of you have participated in. These are some thought exchanges, or the results of some thought exchanges and discussions we've had in the past at the FDP sessions, and it's what's led us into our activity today. So I just wanted to review. We started after the last survey, workload survey was done, where we noticed that there was this association with institutional trust in its research enterprise. So we conducted sort of this little experiment here, looking at matter of trust and what is it about trust at the institutions, or what contributes to trust at an institution, and it came up with several themes. Effective and transparent communication, familiarity with each other, competency and accountability, engagement, value for what each other do. We followed that up with well, we didn't follow it up with the pandemic. The pandemic gave us an opportunity to follow up by seeing how different institutions responded or were affected by that natural stressor. And again, we came up with several themes that were very important in dealing and how institutions were able to deal with this ongoing pandemic, and that is flexibility or adaptability, building relationships or having those relationships and being able to communicate. And we picked up on the fact that what different institutions had in terms of their infrastructure and resources available really influenced how they were able to adapt. So then our most recent thought exchange related to trying to start understanding what kinds of policies, practices, procedures, types of actions we could do individually to try to improve this interaction between research faculty and administrators at the individual institutions. And we had pulled together many thoughts into 3 themes. Those themes being improve processes and timeliness, expand and improve outreach efforts between the PIs and the administrators, and third, increase the understanding and appreciation of what each other do for the research mission of your institution. And what we're going to do today is we are going to take those themes. We've created breakout rooms, rooms 1, 2, and 3, each one focused on a theme. And we've written a scenario, like I said, it's fictional mostly, about what could go wrong or what might happen, and it relates to each of these themes. And what, like I said, we're trying to do is then discuss what do different institutions do, what do people from different institutions do to prevent these things from happening. So with the idea being now to continue to try to develop, best practices, if you will, amongst different types of institutions for improving processes, expanding outreach efforts, and increasing understanding. Okay. We're going to try to break out for about 30 minutes. You will be randomly assigned to a room, and then at the end of that 30 minutes, I believe your room will be cut off and you will all return to the main room where the leaders will report out in 5 to 7 minutes or so about what the main points that were discussed, actions, ideas that came out of those discussions, and then we'll open it up for a global discussion. I'll show you what the scenarios were from the rooms that you weren't in, and we'll discuss for the remainder of the time as a group. So that is the plan. 3 rooms, 30 minutes. So with that, I guess I'm going to turn it back to Sarah to tell us how we're going to be assigned or to make the assignments. Coming back. Let's see, I lost the count of how many people we have. All right, Sarah, is that about everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
111.
All right. I'm not sure how many we started with, so I'm thinking that's everybody. Okay, so welcome back. Hopefully you all had some good discussions. We're going to go through now and hear from the breakout rooms. These are some cues that were given to the leaders in advance, because these are some thoughts that help lead to the themes. So hopefully you all were able to advance some of these into specifics. And hopefully, let me advance. So this is the scenario that came up in room 1. It has to deal with a unfortunate situation where a grant had error. It was a last minute, several in the queue. Seems that many were submitted sort of at the last day. 9 proposals to go out, or admin hitting submit. One of them, they all go out. One comes back with errors, doesn't get really submitted, and the PI is upset. So it really deals with the idea of what can be done to address the timeliness here. And hopefully you've all read that by now. And I'm going to let Joan, I believe, Perilla. Perilla is reporting out on, or Eva, I can't remember which one of you is reporting out or taking notes. Whoever's reporting out, please.
Yeah, I think we both did. But let me just say, I really like the questions that they in the breakout room that people were asking, and they were asking all the right questions. You know, why didn't the central office not review it? Well, it wasn't submitted on time, probably. If you require 6 business days and you get it the day before, and the day of, and you have 10 other grants to review, of course your grant may not get reviewed. And people did mention that being responsible, and there are compliance issues, because NIH would say, well, why did you submit this grant without reviewing it? And if you tell NIH, well, I got it 5 minutes before and I submitted it, NIH gonna probably think that you're very irresponsible. So I think for that particular summary, everyone felt that there are deadlines that you should adhere to, and do not take the risk of being out of compliance with the NIH submitting a grant with 50 million errors on it. Perilla, do you have anything you want to chime in on regarding this?
You're muted. Perilla, you're muted.
I'm sorry. And just really making sure that we really have the backing, the support from, making sure that we have the support from upper management as well. What, even mentioned in terms of really, really great responses. But because of the dynamic and because of the complexity of, of proposing things today, we want to make sure that we're putting the best proposal forward. And I think the key is really communication, interact and continue to interact and communicate, having that collegial relationship between the faculty member and the administrators. And I love a response from John Hopkins. I think Alex and Ted, I love that particular one, because one of the things he talked about was a risk matrix when it comes to, maybe submit a proposal at the last moment. If you put a risk and show that particular risk and how it could impact and affect, the institution overall, you would see things in a different light. So overall, I thought looking at improving the process and timeline, it really goes communication. I think having the institution, back in when we are making sure, and at the end of the day, we are supporting the institution. So, yeah.
Yeah, and let me just say, because we can sum up all of ours in just this little summary here for all of the improved processes and timeline. Alexandria and Ted, they talked about this 3-2-1 risk matrix that Perilla mentioned, and they have a 5-day, and no one really submit before that 5-day deadline, but you do see some coming in at 3 days, and 1 day. At the 1-day period, that's when a lot of them come in, most of them. But at the 3 days, you get some. So they have this 1-pager on the website, and you could probably go and read it, and maybe it's a good model for your university to be proactive on. But I think just to finalize, just to sum things up, that a deadline should be respected. And I have a great respect now for grant submission, because I'm one of those person that don't last minute. But now moving forward, I think we should all be respectful and respectable of the deadlines.
And just one last thing, and speaking to that 3-2-1 rule, one of the things that we have actually incorporated at Charles True at the last day of, we're having them to sign off on something, indicating from our office, didn't have an opportunity to really review. And then you would, that particular PI would just kind of take ownership. So, because a lot of times you will have them coming back saying, why didn't you, or, at some point putting most of the onus on the Office of Sponsor Program? Because I've been here having to defend or sit in meetings and, saying you left this out and all that. So just making sure, that we respect each other in that particular process and communicate.
And Wesley just put the link to the John Hopkins 3-2-1 program in the chat. So it's there for you, folks. Thank you, Alexandra and Wesley.
All right, we're gonna move on to scenario 2. Man, I think David was reporting out on this one. It's well, you can read it there. About research admin and RA not able to address a PI question, or her PI getting frustrated because of getting different answers to their questions. So David, are you ready?
Yes, thanks, Steve. So first of all, I want to say 30 minutes was not enough. We had a very lively discussion. We had a lot of people sharing thoughts, and we could have talked about it for quite a bit longer, and I wish we would have been able to, but thank you for all of the comments. We ended up focusing not on the way to solve that particular situation, because it might fall in some of the other themes, but what could have been done to improve relationships and trust across the university between faculty and administrators, so that this situation, if it did come up, would be able to be solved pretty easily, because everybody understood each other, knew each other, and felt comfortable talking. And we felt like that all contributed towards the outreach efforts between faculty members and administrators. So the main take home that we got was that we really need to focus on stellar customer service. We don't know all the answers. We often have to look those up or go talk to other people. And it's not a bad thing to say, I don't know. But instead of just passing people off like happened in this particular situation, let somebody know, hey, I don't know, but I'm going to look into it. I'll get back to you, or I'll find somebody who does know about this and put them in contact with you. Having those warm handoffs if you do have to send them to another person. Also, really taking the lead, and I would say taking ownership in initiating communication and education across campus regarding what everybody's roles are. We had some good comments about making sure that our websites are updated and define responsibilities and roles for each of our offices, so people know who to go to in situations like this. As far as outreach goes, we talked about, if we're a research administrator, asking to be invited to faculty members, departmental meetings where we can share insights, but also listen to the faculty members and their questions and their concerns, so that they know we understand and we're here to support them. Streamlining communications through a common portal and email inbox was another one. Many of us have specialized email groups that people can send in emails and questions, but sometimes you don't know who to contact, and having a central email inbox repository where they can find the right person for you was suggested, and I thought that was a good suggestion. Finding balance between an individualized service model and specific expertise was a conversation that we had. Having a single point of contact helps facilitate that relationship, so that you know who to go to, but that does have to be balanced with specialized expertise, where if you're a very generalized person and handling everything for a department, you may not have the specialized expertise to handle a specific situation, but you would have that relationship to be able to go to the right person with that specialized expertise. Some of the specific comments that we talked about, we did try to highlight what's different between large institutions and smaller institutions. Organizing SPO units into particular academic units to facilitate that rapport. In a smaller institution, encourage faculty to go above the first contact if there's no answer. And if you're in a research administration office, not be concerned if somebody goes beyond that, if you're unable to respond in a timely manner. Have that culture where you realize that anybody within the organization is willing and able to help people. I mentioned that already. I thought this was a good one. And encourage administrators to serve as translators of admin speak to faculty members, because we do speak a different language from time to time. So making sure that we're speaking the same language and helping to bridge those gaps. But overall, it was a really healthy conversation. And like I said, I think we could have definitely had more.
Excellent. Thank you. Nice summary. Let's see. Room number 3, increase understanding and appreciation. It's had David Boudil and Joan Sear leading this discussion. You can see the scenario there. It has to deal with who knows what about particular guidelines. So let's see, I'm going to leave, I forget. David, were you reporting? I know, or Joan,
Nope,
were you?
Suzanne was.
Suzanne's reporting out.
I was.
She
I
was
thought I was doing scribing.
recording. I thought you said recording.
Reporting.
Oh.
Reporting out about the discussion.
Suzanne, if you want, one of us can report out and then you can correct us with your notes.
I'll augment. I won't correct.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay.
Well, I'll start then, and Joan, feel free to jump in. I think we heard of a lot of strategies that are very similar, although they weren't called the risk matrix to the thing that was posted from Johns Hopkins. And they added that kind of framework seemed to encourage faculty to submit a little bit earlier once they knew what the parameters were. I have a question for Eva and Perilla as when we get to the sort of general discussion about what the meaning of risk is in that. But that seems to be a very general strategy that has been adopted by many different universities, both large and small. Let's see. I can't read my writing here. You're talking about Tricia mentioned the idea of having early contact form that PIs can fill out when they decide they want to apply for a given program that kind of establishes early communication and a timeline for the proposal. And that was a good idea to get communication going early and make sure that PIs are aware of the program's boundaries and guidelines. I think the objective of our scenario, that's shown here on the screen, is sort of preparing. It's a different scenario than scenario one, the room 1 scenario, in that, first of all, the grant actually went out, and I think there was a general consensus among the speakers that the grant should go out in whatever condition. And that seems to be sort of consensus from room 1 too. It's just a matter of how secure we are that it's going to be successful. Let's see. In terms of making the decision of whether it goes out, either there's a general consensus that it goes out, or Melissa actually offered from her institution that it's a shared responsibility. And so there are sometimes decisions where a grant actually doesn't go out, but the decision is generally consensual. At least that's what I gathered from that. And there was a couple of mentions of including departmental staff, having regular contact with departmental staff. Some groups actually send out we do this in Northeastern too, actually send out representatives from the research administration to talk directly with departments, perhaps at faculty meetings and things like that, just to increase sort of face-to-face familiarity. And one thing that we found was generally there was people found that after post-pandemic, the availability of sort of virtual conferencing was made it a lot easier for faculty and administrators to talk and to communicate about grant programs. One thing that surprised me at the very end of the conversation is we talked about how appropriate it was for a research administrator actually to make changes when the PI wasn't available. If there was a lack of communication there, at the very end when something needed to be corrected before submission. And one thing that really surprised me was the number of administrators that were actually willing to make necessary changes instead of sending it back to the PI and doing that. And maybe finding a way to set parameters where that could happen with improved communication before submission is something that this group should consider. So that's what I took away. I don't know if Joan or Suzanne, you have anything you want to add?
Yes, so I think there was a couple of overarching themes, the improvement of the relationship through a lot of communication at a time when it's not a critical submission time. Talking about, when you express interest from an RA perspective, with your PI, maybe you send him a random email when you see him published or her published somewhere to say that you saw the article and was very interesting, that kind of thing. You sort of build that foundational relationship between you and your PI. That you want to promote regular communication between the PI and the Research Administration Office, and it's not one way, it has to be both ways. And to sort of institute a culture of this two-way communication. So I think that there's lots of ways and ideas to kind of foster that, build that relationship. And while some of it might seem, I don't have time for, those are the things that are going to save you on that last day, building those relationships, having them be strong, having an understanding and a respect for and an appreciation for where the other person is coming from will make that team work better on that 4:59 deadline day. So,
yeah, I wanted to add that despite a couple of exhortations, we heard mostly from administrators in our breakout room. One or two faculty, but mostly administrators. And as Joan was saying, it really is a two-way proposition.
Suzanne, what did we miss?
Well, nobody said anything about my example of the neurosurgeon being elbows deep in anybody's brain.
Oh yeah, that's.
I think we've covered all of the aspects.
Actually,
Okay.
one more occurs to me, and that was that I found that many administrators were very flexible and willing to overlook faculty foibles and mistakes like this, but less and less so the more they were repeated. And I guess there's many repeat offenders here, and maybe focusing efforts on improving communications, especially with those and strategies for that, is something that should be considered as well.
Mhm.
Okay, so now everybody has seen and heard a little bit about the three different scenarios, and I think you can see a lot of unifying themes across there. I know 30 minutes wasn't a lot, but now we have another, I think 30 minutes or 29 minutes as a group to try to do that. And I know, we got a thing from Johns Hopkins I think is really useful. I've heard things a lot about risk and who's going to accept that risk. And on the flip side of that, I heard about trust and how much trust are you willing to give to essentially your partner in this. I haven't heard a lot about, I did a lot of communication, but I'm curious as to how many or how frequent is it that an individual faculty member is communicating with a particular research administrator, or is that sort of a rotating type of a thing and it's whoever answers the phone? And how that might factor in, or how do our deadlines? We heard a lot about deadlines. I raised the question in the session I was in. How are those deadlines set, and how involved are faculty, the people who are PIs, how involved are they in setting those deadlines? Or are they just left out and told what the deadlines will be? Do they know what the resources that are available? I do agree communication is key. Submitting it for many of us, we press submit or route, whatever it happens to be in our computer system, and then it's off to be approved. what does that mean? Sometimes I don't know who's approving it. How many dozens of people have to be involved in approving it? You don't understand the process, you don't appreciate it. So I think this is part of some of the issues. I'm hoping we can discuss some very specific types of things and sound like, get out there frequently and often, faculty meetings, perhaps, points of contact, even during the submission process, communicating, hey, I would just be petrified if I'm 3 days out and I was told, oh, by the way, I now have 10 in front of you and counting. So I think that would cause me to hurry up. I think those kinds of discussions would be going on. And I'm going to open it up to everybody. And I see Amanda has her hand up.
So I think one thing that's helpful for our faculty to understand and advocate for is that I don't necessarily have time to go out and speak and talk to different faculty groups. I'm, currently short-staffed, a whole bunch of people and working 15, 16-hour days. I can't even tell you how much of this meeting I've missed because of the day-to-day workload this year. But we're running, many of us are institutions that run our administrative staff so lean that it's really difficult to do those things and build those relationships. We want to, but it's almost physically impossible sometimes. But if the faculty start talking about it, then the administrators listen more than when, or the higher ups in administration listen more than when the research administrators are just complaining about it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point. Resources, that's another common theme, it seems, is what can be done to ensure, does everybody know what the resources are and how they're being used? And is there something that needs to be done to affect that?
Yeah, I had a conversation with a faculty member, not David, at Northeastern a while back. And we were working on redoing our website and said, could you take a look at our website and tell us what you think? And he came back and said, it's really nice, but it's geared toward research administrators. What do I need to know? So of course, now we're working on a faculty portal that says, this is what you need to know, and really hand curate the information that goes on there.
Right.
And, after this discussion, I think that I'm going to pepper it with some, did you knows?
Yeah.
Did you know
So,
this is what's going to happen, after you do that,
So Joan, we were thinking about the same thing, but one of the challenges we have is that a faculty member in a very well-resourced department that has a lot of business manager that can pass off a lot of the responsibilities and delegate needs different information than a faculty member in a less resourced department where they are the faculty member and the administrator. So it's something that we have to constantly consider.
Right.
And I think something that was said was pretty important, and Joan, you hit on it. And we face that from some of our compliance documents are really written by the lawyers for lawyers to cover legalities, and I read them as a mere mortal, lowly faculty member. I don't understand what they're saying, so I'd give it a best shot. They talk and things as well, you should understand because that's what it means. So, well, that does not help me. So translating, so FAQs, things like that. Susan.
Yes, I was just curious. So I'm one of the administrators who is comfortable preferably asking the PI before it becomes necessary to do so about possibly fixing something on their behalf in their proposal before we submit. But I also wonder, in cases where we're not able to get something fixed and we submit, the issue of the AOR certifying that the application is complete and correct to the best of our knowledge at the time that we submit. And that's a legal assertion. Alex, I don't know if you want to have any comments on that, but I just wonder what people are feeling about that.
Were you asking Alex Albanat?
So you're concerned about making legal assertions if you change something that the faculty members put in after the fact, right?
Well,
It depends on your process, right? I see what you're saying. So we require representation certifications to be completed. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize my camera was off. They need to be completed before we will push submit, because that's where they make all the representations and certifications. So if they signed off on that and then we subsequently changed something, I feel like that would be not good for the process, right? As opposed to if we were working, and depending on, you know, some schools where an administrator will work with the faculty member and they're going back and forth. Let's say it's at the department level for Hopkins, right? Where it's their grants and contracts analyst working, and then they say, hey, Professor so-and-so, I noticed this, okay for me to go in and fix that. And then, okay, time for you to sign off on your reps and certs. We're going to upload them and send them to the central, you know, to our office, my office, to sign off on. That would be okay, right? But I agree that if they've already submitted and done some level of certification and then somebody starts messing with it, that could be, I mean, I don't know, from a legal standpoint, either way, the university is going to be on the hook, and so is the PI, but yeah, it could cause some issues, I would think.
Yeah, I think they were sort of minor changes around like typos or math errors or something in the budget.
Right.
Simple error. Nothing.
Yeah.
Exchanging the science or anything like that.
Right,
So,
exactly. The administrative portions, I don't think is a big deal. Now, if you change their answers in their reps and certs, that would be a problem.
yeah. Yes.
Okay, Suzanne, you have your, oh, where'd her hand
Had
go?
her hand up, but it's
Yeah.
been down.
I was waffling on whether I wanted to answer. So I thought the question was if we were, how we dealt with a proposal that we hadn't actually reviewed, that we were clicking on, you know, submitting it and agreeing that it's right and true. Well, to the best of my knowledge is what I get to fall back on. And that if I don't have the chance to review it, it's still to the best of my knowledge that it's right. And I'm going to feel like a idiot later on if there's something that, you know, like David put in the chat earlier about, you know, how does it feel to the funding agency when we continuously submit proposals that are incorrect or have strange boogered up information in them? I've actually gotten some very smarmy is a good way of saying it. Emails from the funding agency going, hi, you guys can't add. I know you live in Arkansas and you have to take off to count less. But
Suzanne, you said you wouldn't tell everybody.
secret, this isn't being recorded or anything.
Yeah, I think it might be.
I think Wes has his hand up.
Yes, Wesley.
Yeah. I just, I think my level of being the AOR and signing off on this, and I mentioned it in our group, when you have the Federal Bureau of Investigation show up and ask a question about why did you sign off on this? It's a proposal. That is a difficult position to be in. And I don't, so I have a different perspective than I used to have, because the investigator isn't here anymore, and I am. And so, you know, there's a lot of places where we are in it together, but there's a lot of places where the institution says, Wes, we authorized you. And I can tell you, the state of Texas says, Wes, we authorized you to sign off on this. What were you doing? And you feel like you're on an island at that point. So I'll share that with and maybe that's something I need to make clearer to the faculty, and I've tried to. I don't get a lot of sympathy, but I try to let them know that there are bigger issues sometimes than people are aware of. So.
So as a faculty, I would say, you know, maybe not a typical faculty, I don't know, but I don't think I would expect Suzanne to sign off on something she thought should not be signed off on. And I would hope she would think that I wouldn't be sending her stuff that I thought shouldn't be signed off on, but
well, the challenge is the last minute, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think Hopkins even spoke to it, you know, their objective is to get these grants submitted. at, basically at whatever, cost. And if you can't.
No, we did not say whatever cost. Did
It
not.
was your primary.
We require full
Uh-oh.
disclosures. This PI must have signed off on all of the questions and things so that when we get it, maybe we don't have as much time to verify, that it's going to not get kicked back on us. But from the compliance standpoint, we're making sure that we've covered the actual legal compliance issues that we would not want the FBI to come to us and say, why'd you sign off? We'll show you why, right? So it's not at all costs.
But if they certify it and you haven't had time to go through and look for a foreign component, do you sign off on it?
But that's what we would look at, right? So it goes down to what we're going to look at in the very last day. We're going to check certain critical things. Everything else, sorry, push a button. And if it gets rejected, then it's on the PI, and they understand that.
All right. So you're going to, and that's the challenge. I mean, some of these applications are quite large to try to go through and look for any foreign reference of any foreign activity within a proposal. To confirm that what they've certified is right is a challenge on the last day. That's why we have time.
Yeah.
We need time.
But I think a lot of this, and we can't always rely on technology because people can not understand how they're answering a question. But if your pre-award system has questions regarding foreign components, foreign activity, identifying who they are, where they are, it's right in front of you, as opposed to having to go through an application that might have multiple pages of foreign things. So part of it is just the way we're geared with our pre-award system, I guess.
And ours is
then Ted, I'm making it sound like it's a breeze, but I'm sure they're all suffering every day when they're.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They don't like the systems. They indicate they don't, and then in the application, it's clear that they did. And then the FBI is like, why did you sign off on it when it's so clear that they were doing something foreign in their proposal? I don't care about your system.
Other people have other comments, things they're picking up on, perspective that we haven't considered.
Is anybody aware of tools? One of the things that was mentioned in our breakout session that I actually didn't bring to the group was a need for more tools to sort of guide PIs and administrators through the submission process. And I know Joan's been working on tools like that at Northeastern for quite a while, but they're not that widespread. And I'm wondering if anybody is aware of like language processing tools that could actually help find some of these things in a proposal, for example, like foreign activities, that would help administrators. Is anything like that on the horizon?
AI reviewers. Yeah.
I feel like I have heard that there's some proposal tools coming out. I'm not, as from the silence, it sounds like none of us have really explored it. But isn't that essentially what NSF has? Right, I think I missed that session last time where they had a webinar and they have some kind of AI tool that actually scans for publication citations in comparison with the PI's technical proposal. I don't know. I could have sworn they had something that they were for foreign components and foreign interests that may or may not have been disclosed. So I know they're working on something.
Yeah, I think NIH appointed a special committee to, especially regarding the foreign side, to look at tools to basically help compliance part and to help people stay out of trouble. I know Michael Drake and a couple other folks I know that are on that committee. I think it came out like maybe a year and a half ago. Yeah. Did we answer your question, David? Maybe Wes and Perilla can actually chime in on what are the repercussions for being out of compliance when you submit a proposal or submit an incomplete proposal. I think what it is you were asking about the risk, and I think it's being punished for non-compliance. I don't know what the risks are because I don't push that button.
Yeah, I was thinking in terms maybe of saying, something that goes beyond just an institution's reputation. Any kind of sanction from granting agencies, whether any granting agencies do that. I mean, the obvious risk here is the risk that the proposal won't get published, right, and so who's responsible for that? I think is the basic objective of the risk matrix we saw. But there may be other risks that besides that were kind of alluded to, but I'm not familiar with, so that's why I asked that question.
And I'll just say the risk just from the reputation, because there have been a few instances where the program official have maybe reached out to the PI and copy, saying, hey, here's some things that, as far as your proposal, things were not in it, because of those. So you're looking at that could hinder, funding to the institution or that type of thing. You look at it from that particular standpoint too, because you want to put the best proposal forward going forward as well. So looking from that standpoint, when you look at risk could impact, funding to the institution, somewhat the type of, proposal that you're submitting and having all of these things not addressed in terms of compliance. And of course, just from the end institution. So. And definitely the PI, don't look, good in that light where your project officer or comment, saying, hey, here's some things, or from our office for that matter. So.
I have a question. Do you think majority institution get away with a lot of things versus, and maybe Kelly can answer this, versus smaller institutions? For like Charles Drew, I feel that we have to have almost a perfect, even though I just got my program funded for $7.5 million. Woo! It was a perfect application, I think. But do you think that the Johns Hopkins and the Stanford or the UCSF can get away with things versus the smaller institutions as far as complying? Wes, are you still there?
I am. I think that the oversight's the same, and quite honestly, the only thing I would say is the larger number of awards. We have more chances to get snagged because of the large number of awards. But conversely, if you have fewer, then one gets snagged, it's probably going to be more likely that all of them are going to get looked at. So, it's kind of, I think there's a double-edged sword there to some extent.
Yeah. And I just think also, Jess, when you mention, large institution, that means you have less at your institution. So you have less support. When you think about some of the larger institutions, I mean, in size with, the support, one or two individual or four for that matter, compared to other institutions where you have specialties looking at sub-awards or looking at that. So you have to maximize when you're smaller from that standpoint as well. Less resources for sure.
Other comments? So I know we've talked a lot about that risk. I mean, I still think that comes back to one of the things we identified some time ago about making sure there's an element of trust going both ways. Communication has just sort of dominated this. I'm curious as to what people feel, both faculty and research admin administrators that communicate with the faculty, or push the button, so to speak, on submission, what's the most effective way you have of communicating? Is it email? Is it virtually? Is it face to face? Or is it really, it just comes filing through a computer system and whoever gets it, gets it?
Well, for me, this is either I'm kind of old fashioned and I like to come to your office and sit in your chair and tell you what I need to have done. And Perilla is really good at accommodating me. Mad sometimes with me, but we get over it. I take her to lunch, we get over it. But I think because I've developed a relationship with OSP and they overlook my defaults and help me out anyway. So I think people have their different ways of communicating, and some folks communicate very well through email. Fix this, fix that. Okay, it's done, so forth. But I like the old-fashioned way, showing up in your office.
David.
Yeah, a good question, Steve. My answer would be all of the above, right? I think it, just like in sponsored research, it depends, right? Is it a complicated situation? Is it something that could be answered really quickly via email? Is it something that really requires a complex, creative solution? I tend to start at the simplest communication method, but then if it gets more complicated, then you absolutely should meet and create those relationships so people feel comfortable reaching out with other questions in the future. But I am a proponent of all communication methods and leverage them, but figure out which one works best. You shouldn't continue to use email when it's clear that that's not solving the problem. Then you escalate it to another communication method.
So let me rephrase my question. Communicating when there's not a problem. I mean, so that you know each other and understand what's supposed to be done, what each other do. Anne, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so I'm a faculty member and I'm old, so I was doing this before we had email. So I would say that for routine things, I think email is absolutely wonderful, or even that device that nobody seems to really use anymore, the telephone. Telephones are actually really useful too. But yeah, it's good to have met your research administrators at least once in person, even when there wasn't, maybe anything on the line. And for anything complicated, it's really, really helpful to be able to just sit down with the person in person and talk to them. And this is one of the things that was, of course, lost when COVID came along and everybody started working from home. And unfortunately, at our place, it was gone even before that, and it's still gone because we don't have enough physical space on campus for everybody. And so things like research administration have been moved to off-campus sites. They're in town, but they're, several miles away. You're not going to walk over to their office and talk to them or vice versa. And I think that's really a shame because it's very beneficial to the whole relationship to be able to talk to the person in person when appropriate.
So Anne, can I accurately surmise that you think that having moved or removed research admin from the people using them was detrimental to the interactions? And
yes, sure it was. Of course, they had to make choices, and it was more important to keep the people on campus that that work with students. And research admin was sort of an obvious thing that you would think would be able to be outsourced, and yes, most of the time it actually is. But yeah, it's really too bad that they're not on campus. It would work better if they were.
I thought so. I just wanted to make sure because I wrote that down. Lana.
And I want to be the devil's advocate, against this argument a little bit. So University of Vermont, where I work, has a large extension department. So before COVID, before the idea of remote work, and we were all in person, we were all in our office, we were all on campus. So folks who were supporting the extension department, were located in a couple of different locations throughout the state. But those of you who do have an extension department know that they are literally in every little town, some very remote areas that are rural areas that don't have good Wi-Fi, and on and on and on. I can just continue with that. So what ended up happening is that the administrative support for those faculty and staff, because extension also tend to have a lot of staff PIs rather than faculty PIs, it wasn't even, so those people who were closer to those central hubs were able to come and were able to meet in person. Those, however, who were more remote, sure, yeah, there were phones, but it wasn't the same, because we all agree that in-person communication and meetings are by far the best way for especially establishing those relationships. Now, once COVID hit and everybody went to work from their homes, what we actually found that in those situations, the research administration became a lot more equitable. That all of a sudden there were no 5-10 faculty or PIs who were able to get together with the research administrator, however often in person in that person's office. But everyone were able to use MS Teams or Zoom or whatever other platform to meet. So that really worked in their favor. The other piece is, even more so than space limitations and such, we are in a really dire competition for talent, for administrators right now. And so UVM, as well as many other institutions that I know, kind of said, okay, well, we can't find enough staff locally. We're going to start hiring remotely. So we do have quite a few now that work from all over the United States. And I think that this is the trend that's going to continue. So we kind of have to find a way to move into this new, I don't want to say 21st century, because we kind of have been in it for a while now, but it is a big, great remote working experiment. There are certainly things that we are losing as the result, but I also think that there are lots of opportunities that didn't exist before. I mean, one of the feedback that I've heard from faculty members that it's, however unfortunate that we cannot sit all in the same conference room, actually meetings are much easier, because these meetings, when we sort of see each other in person, albeit across the screen, can happen. It's much easier to organize. You don't need to worry about space. You need to worry about distances, people working across campuses and having to walk together somewhere. So there are challenges, certainly, but there are also opportunities in this remote environment, which I understand from the faculty perspective may not always be great, because I think most faculty work in person on campus. So the research administration, however, is changing.
Okay, well, with that, we're at the top of the hour. And I want to thank everybody for participating. I think we had a great discussion. I think we will try to compile the FAC committee some of the primary bullet points we have from this and report back to you in a future session. But I want to, again, thank everybody and hope you've all enjoyed the FDP meeting, and that we will, well, I guess not see each other again in January. Maybe see, but really get together again in May, I'm told. So
I think there's one more session.
Turn it back to
after us,
Sarah.
right?
Oops, sorry.
No, I said, I think there's one more session after us, right?
Yes, there is one more session after us.
The committee, yes.
What is that? Is Sarah here to announce?
Yes, she's.
Yeah. So the next session is the committee report outs at 4:30 and closing remarks from our co-chairs.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.